новых, в особенности в книге «АЛЛАТРА», а также передачи с участием Игоря Михайловича Данилова, такие как «Прецедент» и «Шанс на грани». Тема сегодняшней игры – отмена судного процента. Многие люди
Да,
полагают, что
поверни,
если они не
пожалуйста, на
являются
минуту.
клиентами банка,
Нет, нет,
то
всё,
вопрос
всё.
судного процента их не касается. Но мы очень надеемся, что за время игры нам удастся показать, что каждый человек на Земле втянут в этот долговой процесс и насколько он разрушителен.
Наша игра будет состоять из двух частей. В первой части
In the studio to discuss a very interesting topic, the topic of loan interest or interest rate, and how can we change the state of our society. Our game will consist of two parts. First part where speakers will be speak, and second part will be free exchange where you can ask your questions and share your opinion. In Zoom, you have an option, put a hand, and you can press that point and ask a question. And then you will have a possibility to get an answer to your question. We will read it out if possible. And the main question is, what should we make to change the vector of our civilization, of our society from consumer to creative? So please write your questions on chat on YouTube broadcast and we will answer them. If we will not be able to answer all the questions in terms of our game, we will try to answer all this after the game. Dear friends, we live in artificial society and all the crises are really easy to make, especially when you control the finances. We see that we constantly see the negative rates and injections of cash mass into economics and constantly growing, stimulating of consumer society and undermining of the capital, the soul of capitalism. So all the economists say that we all now are on the threshold of economic crisis. And in terms of consumer society, all the crises are slowed by wars and revolutions. And all these leads to suffering of ordinary people. Just people and the society itself suffers. People kill each other and people degrade in physically and emotionally and spiritually. Do we really want to go through suffering? Or we can change it all to build a society of spiritual and morality and to build creative economics. So we would like to know what is the state of nowadays economic system. Yes, a lot of economists say that now the need to build a new economic model is really important. And it's not because the capitalism lived itself out, but because we have now the question of living of our civilization, of survival, because the climatic change is really an important topic now, and we see it all, and the media hush it up, and men nowadays don't have real picture of climatic change. In short time, a lot of areas will be unbearable for living, and a lot of people, millions of people, will have to change their places in search of food and water. And in terms of consumer society, our civilization is not able to survive because all the
Because all interaction between people and countries is based on money. Building a new economic model is possible, especially since modern technical means allow all people to conciliate and interact, provide equal access to information, and make the economy clear. and
Нужно просто
absolute
взять на
sense
себя
transfer.
ответственность и начать
You just need
действовать.
to take
Нужно
responsibility
начать
and
с того, что
self-organize,
рассказать
and
об
you
этой
need to
возможности
start by
всем людям,
spreading
своим
the
родственникам,
information about this
знакомым, друзьям,
opportunity
коллегам по
among your
работе.
friends,
А дальше нам все
relatives,
вместе собраться и
acquaintances,
решить, ну в каком
and
обществе
all
мы на самом
together to
деле хотим
decide
жить.
in what
Неужели
world
нам
we
нравится
should
то
live.
состояние, в котором наше общество
Let's
находится сейчас?
return to
Ну, вернемся к
to
нашей игре, к
our
вопросу
topic
судного процента. Это ключевой
about
момент современной экономики.
loan interest,
И
and
хотелось бы рассмотреть, как использование этого инструмента
and
завело
let's
нашу
figure out
цивилизацию в
how
тупик
we
материального
are now
потребления.
here in the
Чулпан и
consumer
Ильдар
society.
разбирались
And
с историей
Chulpan
возникновения
and
судного
Ildar
процента.
understood and
Удалось ли вам
explored the
узнать что-то
history of its
интересное?
origin
Поделитесь с
and
нами.
found many interesting things.
Да, удалось. Хотим с вами поделиться.
So now we should go a little to history.
Начать все-таки предлагаю с
So what is
определения,
the loan
что же такое
interest?
судный процент. Сегодня в течение игры, что мы будем
What we
иметь
are
в
meaning
виду,
talking
говоря
about
судный
loan
процент.
interest.
В принципе, это явление сейчас настолько
We
повсеместно
live in
вошло в
such
нашу
time
жизнь,
that
что,
this
наверное, эту
even
проблему
children
понимают
have
все.
to
Даже
know
дети уже говорят о
what
проблеме
is the
процентов
loan
по банковским
interest.
кредитам, старуху процентщицу из
And
Достоевского,
we
наверное, все
even know
помнят.
it
Но,
from
тем не
our
менее, все-таки дадим
literature.
определение, что же такое судный процент.
So
Итак,
loan
судный
interest
процент –
is a
это
reward for
предоставление,
using
это денежная
borrowed
плата
money for
за
a
заемные
certain period
денежные
of
средства,
time.
которые ты получаешь на определенный промежуток времени. То есть это
There
все
are
случаи, когда
all
люди берут
ways when
кредит в
you are
банке,
just
когда
borrow
люди или
money from
компании
bank,
предоставляют друг другу деньги в долг за
and
определенную плату, за
you have a
определенный
loan
процент.
for it.
Вот. А издревле вот эту деятельность по предоставлению денег в долг процент
From
за
ancient
плату,
time,
она
this
называется
activity is
ростовщическая
called
деятельность.
money
Просто
lend.
ростовщики тоже мы будем это все употреблять сегодня.
Why we're
Почему мы об
talking
этом говорим
today
сегодня?
and
Почему
why it's
это так
important
важно?
today?
Потому что на
Because
сегодняшний день
nowadays,
судный процент
low interest
является
is
одним
is
из
a key
ключевых
mechanism of management
механизмов
and
управления,
manipulation
механизмов
of the economy by the
манипулирования
central
экономикой стран во
and
всем
commercial
мире, в том
banks
числе через установление основных
in
банковских
all
ставок
countries.
центральными банками абсолютного большинства стран. Чтобы
And
вот так сразу показать, что
now
это действительно
I
касается
want
нас,
to show
нас
that
всех, каждого из нас.
it is about
Хотим
each
продемонстрировать
person.
небольшой отрывок
And now we
из
want
советского
to
фильма
show the
«Республика Шки»,
essence of a
который
small
ярко
video
показывает
from a
сущность
famous Soviet movie,
ростовщичества.
Republic of
Внимание
Shki.
всем на экран.
Thank you.
Спасибо.
Good boy.
Хороший мальчик.
Give me a bit. Where is yours?
Дай кусочек. А твой где?
I borrowed two in you. What for?
Новенькому задолжал.
Well, give me a bit.
Зачем? Ну дай кусманчик. Ну что ты чего захотел? Суди до ужина. 2 пайки отдашь. За ужином и за завтраком. И мне тоже. 1/4 отдашь. Целую. Ладно. Эй, новенький, и мне подкинь. И мне тоже. И мне. Отдадите по целой 1/4. Спасибо. Спасибо.
What a skinny you are.
Какой ты худенький.
Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Спасибо.
Rockefeller, Delane, Rothschild.
Собака. Ротшильд.
Вот такая, я думаю, очень яркая зарисовка.
Now, after viewing these vivid sketches, we can understand the point.
Хочу сделать
And now I should express some point,
который предлагаю
the most interesting thing.
Вот сейчас в современном мире судный процент
Now, nowadays, the loan interest is such general that we see it as usual thing and necessary for economic development.
есть понимание,
But it's not like that, and we will show it during our game.
а это
It is absolutely abused. Sorry.
It is mechanism which is not natural for a person, and it's imposed format of consumer way of life.
Yes, this theme is really interesting, and lending rate has three etaps in its development. First stage is of absolutely ignorance, complete rejection. A second is semi-legal position. When under a formal ban, authorities and clergy turn blind eyes to the money lending. And the third stage is when the banks appeared and money lending became a public affair. The first stage of full prohibition was the longest. From the books of Anastasia Novych, we know that our civilization exists for 12,000 years. But in our history, we learn only late 6,000 years. And first 6,000 years was the period with matriarchat, and when the spiritual basis of our society was strong and the virus of moneyland was not able to develop in these conditions. And the second stage of some struggle for the introduction of loan interest was quite long too. It was till the bourgeois revolutions, and it became from the first state of Sumer, second millennium BC, when the material goods was collected on the capital was collected on material goods, and people gave in growth goods and materials, and now we turned it out in money.
The history of money and money circulation show that users were very ingenious in creating ingenious schemes for the accumulation of money capital. The most important tool is loan interest. And you know, the name of the inventor is unknown. But Yuri Katasonov, in his book, writes that the most likely the inventor was prompted by the same one who tempted Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And to put it straight, it can be said that the loan interest is one of the tools of the devil's influence on humanity. Yeah, now this phrase probably to cut hearing or confuse people, but let's look at the facts documented by the people of antiquity, consider the historical sources of the problem. What do we see? We know, and we most of all we feel, that all prophets opposite usury, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, are warned people about the morality of this phenomenon for our civilization. But at the same time, there were people and forces that purposefully introduced it into the life of our society. For example, how far these scribes have gone in their quickly interpretation. For example, in Torah, there are words, if thy brother grow poor and fall into decay with thee, support him, whether he be a stranger or a settler, that he may live with thee. My brother, who is he? And we see that the brother is every person are equal, and the prophets could not speak other. But in the other book, the Deuteronomy, it is said that you can lend on growth to strangers, but not to your brothers, and you can loan to another nations, and you will have power on them, but you don't get on growth, and you don't loan yourself, and no one will be able to have power on you. And now we see that that's the mechanism where the consumer society mechanism was based on.
And in summer, we see that goods were given in growth. The goods, the seeds, and later then in Athens, this was made to money lending, and they had a law of authority dragon. It was called dragon law, and it said about huge lending rates. And a lot of researchers say that in ancient Athens, it was the worst conditions for people of this country in all the history. And we have this now. And we see the conflict that it develops so hugely in society, and all the great thinkers do not support this idea. They see and point out how dangerous it is. And a good point is that money are made for change, for exchange, and money cannot make new money. They are just a mean of exchange. And you know, in ancient times, money lenders was like more villains than thieves, and they.
В принципе, можно сказать, что судьба ростовщика, она не была, в общем-то, особенно завидной, потому что...
So we can say that the fate of such people were not very happy, because all society didn't think that this is good, and even in literature and even in government. For example, in France, in 12th and 13th century, usuries was banned to secular authorities, and they're banned to live in city, and judge was banned to listen to their complaints. And in Holland, until 1657, it was a law which banned usurers to live in Essen and to do a communion. And the church separated them from the fellow citizens.
Были монастыри, которые сами занимались ростовщичеством, и таким образом они увеличивали свои земельные угодья.
А кто, например, вот помнит, что долгое время инквизиция охотилась за главами ростовщиков?
There was an attempt to restrict money lending, their lending rate, like when Templars, they how to say it? They restricted it to 10%. In time, it arose to 40%. And later, first banks were appeared, and the money lending and money lenders turned to respectable people. Under their backs stood royal armies who gathered taxes, and it all turned out to a positive image of a banker. And you know, to the history of American state history. Thomas Jefferson, the third American president, said that I believe that the institutions of bank is more dangerous than an armed army. And if the American people allow private banks to manage the issuance of currency, then banks and corporations will rob people and their property until their children wake up homeless on a land once conquered by their parents. And we see that American nation did allow this, and now printing machine is in private hands.
And now, murdered President Kennedy, in his writings, he told about these times. He told, man got rid of the devils.
And it's a quote about that the money lending puts all the people in society into slavery, and more than 3/4 of people on earth now are on slavery because of money lending.
Usurers in Russia were called pre-sellers, hyenas merciless, and then spread loan for work, became one of the main factors of enslavement of people. And neither Peter I nor subsequent rulers could save Russia from usury. The Medici financed at interest the Swedish company of Peter I. The Rothschilds. Speaking today about the lending rate, we use the medical term for the virus with respect to usury. So, if we develop this analogy, so the incubation period has already ended, and the disease has reached its apogee. And if we don't do anything, then, like doctor says, lethal outcome is possible. The organism in which the virus has entered will simply die. But after all, this organism, this our community, this all we are, this humanity. And how this disease began? I think that the root cause is limited capitalization and prohibited interest on loans. If you remember, we told about the first period of loan processes when he was completely banned. Because in that times, in ancient times, the moral values, the spiritual values were the most important for people. And after this, after we lost all this, after matriarchat, after first states, and all these were happening at the same time. And after this, we lost our moral values. And if we're talking about like analogy, like immunity, that immunity of each person and in society the whole were like fall down. And today, as a result, we have wars, we have crises, we have all things that we are looking now. And now we are faced with problems, and we need to do something with this. Thank you, Chulpan. Listening to you, I thought that on our consciousness it is put in that ancient times were severe and struggling, and now we live in perfect world. But is it so? If we lost the grains of knowledge, if we lost the spirituality, and talking about such a word as jubilee, especially when it's 50 years or another round date, where did it come from? It came from ancient society, and firstly it was called yovel or jubilee, and it was a horn. And yovel is a sound which is made by Jewish musical instrument.
And in these horns, these horns were played on jubileum year. The year of freedom were called. It was the 50th year. And when this horn played, it was the year of freedom, and people freed their slaves and forgave to each other their debts, and everything that was in debt turned to its how to say it, to its owners, and all the debts were annihilated. This 50th year was after 770s, 7 years, and it was sacral. People really respected the number of 7, and now it is lost. People don't understand what is seventh heaven or seventh dimension. And all these you can find in books of Anastasia Novak, in book ALLATRA. It is written really interesting about that. And what condition do we see of modern society now?
Давайте посмотрим, в чем смысл бизнес-процессов в нашем обществе. Характер экономических взаимоотношений сейчас таков, что основная цель бизнеса в основном является извлечение прибыли.
We see
И это
now
можно наблюдать в любом секторе экономики, и это не зависит от размера компании. Благосостояние теперь рассматривается больше
we see now that all the
в основном забыта. Но на самом деле
human relations are now based on profit and making money. And we see that inside it's not like that. Every person wants to do his the business he likes, and to live in a world he likes to live in, and not to be a part of a society who lives only for making profit. And this profit is for consumer. It has no real end. It's for further consumer. And you know, the sphere of education and medicine becomes a business, but they must be free and available for everyone. For example, education becomes a service, and medicine becomes a business which is made on lives and health of people. But its true meaning is absolutely different.
What do we see now in the production of consumer goods around the world? We see only overproduction. Just everyone can know from their friends, or directly know, that now goods are produced so much, at least like in developing countries, that a huge number of goods are not in demand, not sold for various reasons, and are simply destroyed. Manufacturers and producers of goods are taking measures to ensure that we often bought their goods. There is a tendency to purposefully reduce the durability, service life of goods. Manufacturers sometimes just jewelry fit into the service life. The next day the product fails, and we have to buy like a different version of products over and over again. And there are many examples of this. We can see that consumer society blossoms, and we understand that someone needs it. I agree with you absolutely, and it's very interesting that we are just through our food and clothes like out, and someone just they have no food and no clothes. Through our game, we will mention such words like like money owners. Many people mistakenly believe that their country's money belongs to their state, but in fact, in many countries, this is not the case. Money is the property of those who issue it. I wondered how might the owners of money manage to tighten the debt noose around the neck of the world economy. In the current situation, the state is in a state of chronic debtors. The citizens of these countries are burdened with mortgages and loans. All citizens have many debts at all levels of money. There is like a feeling that the whole world owes someone. There is such a thing as the total debt of the country. This is external debt when a country borrows funds for economic development or repayment of existing debts.
Что 2,5 года все жители Японии должны работать, ничего не тратя на свои собственные нужды, чтобы
How it works? Like all people just need to work for give back the debt of their own country, the public debt. For example, in America, the state debt is $22 trillion, and the total debt of the country, according to some experts, reach as much as $400 trillion. In order to understand the scale of this giant debt bubble, we calculate this estimated total debt per one American owners of money, $1 million. And you see that to grow this financial pyramid and debt pyramid is really profitable. It is a great instrument for manipulating of state economics. And to owners of money, it is really interesting to put countries in debt in this debt. If the loan rate is such a good instrument to take power on the state, why shouldn't it be put on usual citizens? So, when they advent such things as credit cards, now it's easier to draw people into debt addiction. Having a credit card, people spend not yet earned money. A person perceives the size of the credit limit on the card as his own cash. And he starts to live on debt, to spend money he didn't earn, and oftenly people give debts.
Yeah, you know, we have now a connection. Olga Simpson, an entrepreneur from the US. It would be interesting to know about what's happening in the US. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I would like to tell you what's actually as for the US. So I just moved to the US 10 years ago, and it was shocking to me because, you know, just all this credit history, you know, that a credit card, you can just make it at an early age, and all this story just actually, and anybody can be dependent on it, you know, so anybody can take just a mortgage mortgage or might take just loans for a car, for a holiday, anything. And you know, just from an age, just people are just create a story. They put in much attention to create a story. So since I moved from Russia, of course, I didn't have such an experience. And now I would like to ask, to tell you about what's happening in Russia. And so when I just came from Russia, we didn't have a high loan interest. And so actually, I would like to ask what's happening in US. In Russia, actually, just a mortgage system is also developing, and for example, a young couple, it's called a kind of 2.5 interest rate on mortgage, and if it's not the lowest loan interest, so usual mortgages are just 7-10 loan interest. And but I would like, again, coming back to what's the loan interest in the US. Because I have relatives who got just, of course, heritage. They got a house, and they are paying off for repaying for this house already more than 30 years. So, you know, it's kind of, you need to live 2 lives just to repay all the debt for a house. Isn't it just weird? But is it like an exception, or is it just the usual case? You know, Oля says, I think it's a usual case, and I'd like to give you an example. And my father-in-law is about 600, and just my stepfather has to pay for just loan for about 20 years. So if anything happens with my stepfather and my mom, so I will have to pay the debt, and actually the second generation has to pay. So of course we have just insurance, and of course my husband can pay that, and it happens very often that, for example, one of the spouses dies and the other one has to pay all the debts. And of course you have students loans, and it's also very just critical issue, because $1,000, okay, Americans can have $100,000, and this loan shouldn't be higher than that sum of money. And when a person gets higher education, and his income actually doesn't correspond just to the waste that they spend money on studies. So it just, you know, a person, just an ordinary American, lives under stress constantly. Of course, you need to pay for education. You need, and there is such a concept as microloans. So a person pays for everything, for a rented house,
what constant stress
for
leads
education.
People. You just have not loans, but microloans, microcredits, and you can understand the constant stress of people. And he thinks only about, like, all his thoughts occupied with only consideration how to make ends meet and to pay off these loans. Really, how does a person solve these problems? Are there any answer for it? He makes it somehow he survives, but I saw some statistics and bank loans and credit history. If you have good credit history, you can get more lower interest loan, and if you had bad history, you get high interest interest loan, but microcredit, the interest may be up to 600%. Imagine, a person takes a loan, and to the end of the year, he has to pay 600 times more than he took. And it is really profitable for these companies, yeah, and nobody can pay it out, and people have to sold and to give to these companies their apartment, houses, cars, and the government is against these microcredits for people not to get in this trap. And how do you have in Russia? It is really interesting here. We have such phenomena like microcredit too, and it's really popular among citizens because you usually use it, to make it to a pay bill. And the main reason is to make it from a pay bill to a pay bill. And indeed, if a person take money to pay 300% per annum, then at the same salary, he again will not have enough, and he will again be forced to borrow.
And a person has to make it more and more loans in this organization is microfinancial services. And it's a financial trap on citizens, and it takes more and more people in it. And people have to sell their cars to repay the loan. And people, it's really these causes take part when people have to sell their apartments, and our government tries to struggle this phenomena too by stricting the interest rate, but I have such experience on myself. I had a consumer loan, and then we had a crisis in 2008, and I have no possibility to make a repayment in time. And then the fines came on my loan, and I had to sell my car to repay this loan. And I have the same stories from my friends. And it's usual opinion that it's a financial illiteracy, and I agree about it.
But I also think that the problem is like unending desires of all people, and people want them to be like here and right now. People want this desire to happen immediately, and that's why we are in this situation now.
Thank you. And now a word to Sergey. Sorry, to Stanislav. Let's see a situation when a person wants to make a loan for a house. And about microcrediting, it's when you take 7,000 to a month, and you have to repay 2 times more. And thus, microcredit services are like near every subway station all over the city, and it's easy make to take this loan, and on internet, on telephone, they are proposed to every person, and it is made that it is really convenient to become a credit debtor. And in all the malls, in all the trade places, there are a lot of these microcredit services, and you can take any good on loan. And the loans are really an instrument, a tool to manipulate people. And I would like to make a few examples. A few years ago, I had a car, and then such a thought came that I want to sell this car and to buy a new. My car was about 300 rubles, and new car was about 650, and it didn't stop me. I went to an auto salons and made a test drive of a cars like about $1 million per car. And I decided to buy a car on 750,000 rubles. And I was proposed to take a loan on 700 annual, or on 7% annual. So we made this deal, and a lot of, trinkets was added to me, like carpets in a car and something like that. And then after this, a new thought came that I really want a new home, a new apartment. And even when money came to me, the thought about repaying the loan I had on my car didn't come to me. I was concentrated on making loan for a new apartment.
Но желание-то иметь свой дом никуда не ушло, поэтому тут уже я пустился, так сказать, в поиск заемных средств, занимал еще кучу кредитов в банке. Это дом был построен.
And then I had to search for new money where I could, because I did take this loan to build a house, and it was built for half. And I had to search for another ways to pay it all out, like with all my friends and all like this. And as a fact, I had about 10 loans, about 300 rubles of debt. Almost every day, I had to repay some debt to somebody, not including these loans. And it really was hard time for me.
And I have one more case. We took a credit, like a credit card on 100,000. And we began to use it, like at gas station, at cafes, at groceries, at shops, etc. Have like extra money. But although, when you have 10 credits and loans, everything is much more fun. You're constantly looking for somewhere to get with money, so as not to allow delay. So, what helped me? Me and my wife start to work more, and my father helped me to renew a loan and to do like a rate of 10%.
и неоднократно они переносили срок
And also, my mother
Также мама взяла беспроцентную суду у
asked
своего
the employer
работодателя, как я говорил,
for an
помогла.
interest-free loan for
Но
us.
время, знаете, было
This
крайне
is
непростое, когда каждый
this was a really tough time
думал,
for
что
us, and
где
each
взять
of us understood what it
очередной
is.
платеж и что сказать своему товарищу, которому подходит время
And
платить.
it's very hard when you understand that you should pay and there is nothing to pay.
Пожалуйста. Мне на самом деле хочется Станислава дополнить, потому что вот если Станислав умудрился, да, вот
I wanted
набрать
to
столько
add
кредитов,
something
то
to
у меня
Stas.
было
If
жесткое правило. Я
Stas
когда-то
could
прошла
make
тренинг «Путь к
so many
финансовой
credits.
свободе», и
Once I
возникали
was
3
in
правила, которых я четко
training
придерживалась. Первое правило – это
way
держись
to financial
подальше от
freedom,
кредитных
and there
карт.
was 3
Второе
rules.
правило
Stay
–
away
тратить
from
деньги
credit
только
cards.
если ты заработала.
Second, do not
И
spend
третье
money that
правило –
you
это…
have not earned.
Так, и третье правило
And there was third rule.
Да, научись откладывать, да, научись откладывать. Вот, спасибо.
That you
Вот.
should
И
save
вы
some
знаете, я
money. And I've
придерживалась действительно этих правил всегда
always
и была
was
уверена,
strict
что
to these rules.
вот тема судного процента это не про меня. Вот эти все банковские
And I thought that all these bank histories is not about me.
белое пушистое, да, в этом плане. На самом деле,
And
готовясь к этой
when I was
игре,
preparing for this
изучая
game,
весь материал, я
I realized, and I'm sure that every one
уверена,
of
что
us,
каждый из нас, каждый, что стар, что млад,
we all pay loans.
мы все платим по
If we
кредиту.
buy
Потому что если мы
some product,
некий товар,
or
для производства которого
when
производитель
for
взял деньги
production this product, the
для оборудования, возможно, для
person took a loan for it.
неважно. Стоимость этого
Loan
продукта заложена.
interest is already in the price of this product.
Если мы пользуемся какой-либо услугой,
It doesn't matter what
неважно,
we
опять же,
use,
парикмахерские услуги, стоматологические, если, опять же, человек, который нам оказывает эти услуги,
if a person took a loan to equipment or his office,
кредит для приобретения там,
they also pay interest on these loans.
чтобы оборудовать этот кабинет, в котором он работает. То же самое, все эти проценты, они
All these
заложены в
percents, it's
стоимости
already
этого
in
продукта.
the price of this product, and we all pay for it. We all slaves of this loan interest. We all pay for it.
Знаешь, вот было интересно
It's
узнать,
really
для меня это
interesting
было новостью,
to
что
find out
до
about it
50%
that
стоимости
more than
каждого товара
50%
это
of every
оплата
product,
процентов на разных уровнях.
it's
А еще о чем я подумала, когда ты
we're
сейчас
paying for
рассказывала,
these loans
как еще каждый
for
человек втянут в эту долговую
every one of
зависимость.
us.
Ведь у нас есть государственный долг, который оплачивается из наших налогов. И по оценкам экспертов, например,
Experts say
в
that
Соединенных Штатах Америки этот станет скоро первой
it's
статьей
almost
расходов,
the
то есть
first
практически вся экономика страны будет расходоваться исключительно на оплату процентов. В чем здесь
where
вообще
is the
логика?
logic in it?
Да, вот, друзья, вот посмотрите все-таки
Yes, friends, look
опасность
to
судного
the
процента, да, ведь по большому счету он является прародителем инфляции. Инфляция
the loan
ест
interest
наше
it
время,
leads to
ест наше внимание, она
inflation,
ест
but the
нашу
most
жизнь.
dangerous phenomenon of a loan
Фактически, вот пример
interest
Стаса, таких
is
примеров можно
constant.
привести миллионы, таких людей очень много. Он показывает, что
Such
человек фактически
examples,
был занят
it's a lot.
мыслями, своим вниманием только с тем, чтобы удовлетворить свои
As a
желания
person puts
сначала, а
attention
потом, чтобы
to
рассчитаться с кредитами. Нужно было больше работать,
pay for his
нужно было
desires,
давать
and then
друзей,
he
знакомых,
has to
чтобы все это дело погасить,
pay
исправить.
money for that
Получается, что
and
все
take
его внимание,
money
вся его
from
жизнь,
the
она
relatives and so
протекала
on.
вот с одной только вот целью
And you
обеспечения,
realize that your life,
скажем так,
you spend your life
решения своих
on
проблем.
figure out these
Хочется
problems to
спросить,
find
а жить
money.
когда, да? Вот
And I
если
want to ask the
получается, что
question,
все
when you
люди
will have time to
становятся
live
рабами
if
системы.
we all
И
are
вот
slaves of
почему
the
он
system?
порождает этот судный процент инфляцию? Ну, прежде
And
всего,
what
правильно сказала
this
Чулпан, что мы, когда идем в магазин и
inflation
оплачиваем товары,
leads to.
то в стоимость этих товаров уже вложен судный процент. То есть,
And
соответственно,
all
товары уже
goods are
дороже, чем
already
могли бы быть.
this loan interest.
Это первый момент. Второй момент – это то, что судный
All
процент,
these loan
который
interests
генерят
which
ростовщики, ну, в современном обществе это банки, да, то получается, что эти деньги, процентные вознаграждения, которые они получают, они ничем не обеспечены, никакими товарами. То есть это по существу пустые деньги, да, то есть это вот то, что раздувает нашу экономику и приводит к инфляции. Но и это еще не самое страшное.
Judge yourself.
Посудите сами.
The
Ведь количество
amount of money
денег в
in
любой
every
стране в
state is
экономике, оно
really
ограничено.
restricted,
Ну,
and
понятно, что
the
эмиссией
issue
денег
of money
занимаются
makes the
центральные
central
банки,
banks,
they make the financial management. For example, in Russia, emission is provided according to quantity of money and export that comes from outside. And now see, a person comes to bank and takes and loans $1 million. And he needs to, and it's 20 annuals, and he needs to repay 1,020,000. But if economics has restricted amount of money, then it comes out that someone has to become a bankrupt for this one to pay this extra 20,000. And this is a mechanism of consuming society. If central bank has to make more and more new money, new cash, and we see it now, and we see constant injections of cash in economics, of unsecured money. For more people could make new extra money to repay these loans. And all these money lenders thus have the instrument tools to manipulate, because anytime you put more cash into a market, you take away this cash, and it's a crisis. And all the goods and all the businesses that were put on a loan, or the loan was taken for, it becomes a privacy of these companies, of these financial companies.
And just people suffering, and suffer, it's our attention. And this is the question, for what we are here? We're here for living the real life, and we need to just waste our life for decide like problems like work or pay loans or interest loans, and we need to be a slave of a system.
It turns out
we kind of just implement the plans of our so-called owners. Yeah, surely. We used to the idea that somebody takes responsibility instead of us. And you know, of course, there's lots of information about how to make money and how to manage it, but right, we kind of stay fools because we shift our responsibility onto others. So I have a question to another speaker who has experience with banking. So could you please tell about the work of banks, so to say, within? Yeah, hi, just a second here. So according to my experience, I worked in one of their commercial banks in Ukraine, and during this period, I worked with the top managers. And so, how does the work the bank work? So I had, just roughly speaking, it's a kind of a subject entrepreneur. And of course, he's interested in our profit because everybody works. To make the service of the good just more attractive. And so, how does it work? Bank gives loan credits, and it accumulates this interest, and the interest. Just to make for a client attractive, the bankers they just voice that interest which is more attractive, which looks attractive, but in fact it's kind of secret. And of course, when a person, a client, he expects 20-30% interest, but it turns out to be 50. And so how does the bank work? Okay, bank has its capital. Just imagine $100, for example. And the loan interest is 25%. So this 25% is actually the bank's income. But in fact, just as a result, bank gets $125 back. So the bank can just direct this money onto the further capitalization of the bank, or just for the income. But we need to to understand, we have this self-value. For example, of course, we have all the expenses included onto that interest, and the rest is just. And if the bankers, marketers, they have 80% interest, so just to make for clients attractive, if they are ready just to get the profit of 100%. So this interest scale has no limits. And the marketing department, well, its task is to make these loans attractive, look attractive to the clients. So talking about one of the banking projects. So you see, credit card is represented as like golden fish, which fulfills your desires. And of course, all the programs are just oriented just to raise interest in the clients and their wishes. So what is the bad point of this just loan interest? In fact, it is just this money is actually it doesn't take part in so-called lively economics. It's just like fiction. And if the bankers just transform it as a real profit, so the government then has like deficiency of money. What is happening? Again, just the whole government, the whole country needs to take a loan from another country. And this debt is still increasing. And what is the bank's work? Banks are just is an unstable organization, and bank, of course, is dependent on the government, on the politics. And even just dependent on information, so-called flows. So, and it's not stable at all. Just a bank can be can finish its work out of a sudden. So the clients, they kind of just if they have any problems, they have to solve these issues themselves. You cannot just rely on the bank. So the loan interest is the tool just of money's owners, and of course just makes people slaves. Just this is the system's trick, to make people be slaves, and just they keep people working on retaining that loan interest. Yes, Vladimir, you're absolutely right. and all these difficulties of the so-called financial slavery just lies on people's clients' shoulders. And even the issue of how the bank just chooses clients for itself, just this criteria are very interesting. Banks say that they're interested in the clients who make their obligations on time, and clients should repay their debts on time. And in any case, the bank should be sure that the client would return that loan interest under any circumstances. And you see, a person takes a loan and starts repaying, and for some time, a bank just suggests the same client to take another loan, and but the client hasn't paid the first one, and more often the client, it's kind of seduction for him, and of course a client takes another loan. So it just sounds illogical. Actually, these are the potential risks for the bank. Responsibility. So a person has to, and so a person actually he returns that loan just within many years. But what does he actually return? He returns his most valuable resources, its time and his life. And in fact, it's a real contract with a Satan. So, if a potential client, is so-called payable, he's not quite, of any interest for a bank. And one of my acquaintances, she had this experience, and she tried to take a loan, but the bank kept on refusing her, and she couldn't just understand why. She could repay that, but then, that's the saddest thing, just to live on loan.
Я думаю, что этот вопрос будет неполный, если мы не рассмотрим.
I think this question will be incomplete without considering the issue of the central bank. We give the floor to Irina.
Я знаю, Ирина по этому вопросу высказаться.
So let's see what is the central bank in today's world. In theory, the central bank is the organization responsible for the monetary policy of the state. That is, it's a body that must manage finance at the state level and to manage it so the economy flourished and there was financial stability in the country. To do this, it's given special tools to manage the issue of money, setting bank rates and currency regulation. But for what we see in practice around the world, the body that should work for the benefit of the country and benefit of people, in reality, works for the benefit of unknown person in the world. So, central banks all around the world not obey government of their country, and they lead an independent policy, and in fact are branches of the US Federal Reserve. Let's see it in an example of our country. I will read one moment. I don't want to be what we see in Central Bank of Russia, for some reason, is not responsible for the debt of the state, for the benefit of which it works. Formally, the Central Bank is accountable to the State Duma, but in fact, Central Bank conducts an independent policy.
But what we see in Constitution, the central bank has an exclusive right to issue money and performs its own function independently of other public authorities. When I say that I haven't took it somewhere, everyone can see and read it in the Constitution.
В моем варианте, вот несколько лет назад, сейчас я прочту следующую фразу, процитирую, вернее, точнее, она какое-то впечатление на меня произвела.
This quote made such an impression for me.
Прошлогодная фраза все еще стоит, значит,
In the law of central banks, supplied that it is independent, legal, and the same composition of the owners is legally unknown to citizens.
Ну вот догадайтесь сами, да, что называется. Дальше еще что интересно.
The central bank controls the banking system and itself performs the functions of the bank through relation of the budget of Russia Federation. But for some reason, it doesn't finance the budget deficit of the Russian Federation. It turns out.
И что получается, да? А ведь получается, если сейчас абстрагированно берем пример только вот Российской Федерации, да, что
if you talk about the example of Russian Federation, that it
нет, какие-то, наверное, минимальные рычаги есть управления власти, но вот
there is no
рычагов управления получается не у президента.
It doesn't obey the president of government.
И получается, что мы являемся таким филиалом Федеральной резервной системы. Хотя, в принципе, это по всему миру. Знаете, мне это, наверное, напоминает какой-то спрутик такой. И мы все такие страны,
It reminds that all countries are obey Federal Reserve System.
Ну, вы знаете, мое мнение, что благодаря вирусу судного процента, как сказала
thanks to the introduction of the low interest virus, the worst thing happened with our society. The goal was substituted. We stopped to live for spiritual development. We forgot who we are. We live just to earn money instead of spiritual development. Instead of going to the spiritual world, to home, the money become our world. It doesn't matter to whom you speak, it eventually goes to money. Everyone discusses how to earn them, how to save them, to increase them. How it happens? If the money becomes an illusion of freedom and safety. I haven't met anyone who had enough of money which he earned. In our society, we have some kind of standards of living. And when you achieve some kind of a level of life, you should be happy, but it turns out that you're not. You always want to achieve something more. When you wanted to have a car, when you got it, you wanted to buy a better one, and it's related to all of things. We're supporting this illusory image. Who in me even needs it? And when we realize our dual nature, this gives an answer. Our animal mind needs. It will always eat our time and attention, eating our life.
Basically, people take loans in order not to buy goods which they need, but in order to boost in front of others, or just to comply with a certain circle of people, to show that I'm from this community, I wear these branded clothes, I drive a luxury car. And you know, it comes to very funny things, like ridiculous. You remember this? Recently, the iPhones which entered the Russian market, people paid much more for them just in order to have the iPhone earlier than everyone for a week and to boost in front of others. What is happening actually? How come a person takes a loan just for some unnecessary goods? Why is this happening? It's very interesting that it has become such kind of a race for goods. have, possess, compete kind of demands, and there is competition for priority, for the supreme status. Is actually the animal component ruling, and people start earning. The producers of advertisements started earning on that. I was interested in how we reached such a situation that we are so keen on advertisements and we are so influenced by advertising. I studied this issue and I know that advertising used to be this way very long ago. At the beginning of last century, it already about the characteristics of goods, but now the advertisements are mostly motivating and urge people to buy. And basically, the founder of advertisements, which Edward Bernays, it's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He was the founder of advertisements in the 20th century. He studied the works of his uncle and he understood that on the unconscious level, a person may be urged to buy. And from this point, the advertisement era began. And the most impressive experiments was that with women. He conducted an experiment of women, and in societies it wasn't habitual, but for tobacco in manufacturers, women were a half of the market. They paid to Edward Bernays for increasing sales among women, sales of tobacco products, and first he studied what a cigarette is for a woman, and it turned out that it is associated with the male force, masculine force. And so he arranged some kind of performance during an Easter parade, and he asked some women, girls from the highest society, to take cigarettes from under their clothes at a certain point in time. He informed mass media in advance and said that some activists will be burning the Statue of Liberty in New York. So what we see, women from higher society, they are smoking cigarettes openly and freely. And there is an association that smoking is freedom. They burn this lantern, the fire, and this is associated with the Statue of Liberty in the USA, and this news was promoted all over the world from the USA to other countries, and sales of cigarettes started to increase drastically. And the whole idea of Bernays is that if a woman is smoking, she becomes stronger and she has equality with men, which is the main point. She kind of was raised to this level, and this way, by managing our animal component, they learned to work with this. Advertisers learned how to work with this, and they do it still to nowadays. And who is responsible for this? That's the question, because the responsibility is with the person. Let's recall that a human being is dual, and if he will consciously spend attention on his spiritual component, then the world can just overturn and this consumer society will be transformed. What do we have now? We often buy goods which we don't need for money which we don't have. We go to the bank, we hope that some product will bring pleasure to us. We sign a loan agreement, loan contract, some obligations, and our happiness and our joy diminishes because this is not true happiness. It's not that joy. The joy is not in the matter. We get only an illusion of pleasure, and this way we just become consumers. You know, advertising influences, like you've said about the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He understood that by influencing our animal component, it's possible to force a person to act irrationally. So very often it happens this way. We harm ourselves. If we follow our animal component, we often act harming ourselves. Even a cigarette, if we take a cigarette, all people, intelligent people, understand that health is not increasing due to cigarettes, but the whole world is smoking because advertisements show successful men. Now advertisements bear what kind of a character? They show success, paradise pleasures, paradisical pleasures, something which we cannot live without, and if we purchase it, we will become sort of happy, more successful, etc. And we kind of get hooked on it. Our animal component is hooked, but we admit this, we tolerate this. Like you said, this need for freedom, it's actually an appeal to human spiritual needs. Why people get hooked on this? Because this is manipulation of human spiritual needs. Very often in advertisements we can hear the words freedom and other our basic needs, but this is such a subtle substitution because the spiritual knowledge has been lost in society. And now we would like to give the floor to Volgograd, one of our representatives. He would like to talk about consumption. Is Volodya with us? He is. Hello. I greet everyone. Can you hear me well? Good afternoon. We've touched upon such a concept as consumption, and I would really like to talk about this a little bit. This very word and the image of consumption or consumer, as we use it, this cannot be, this shouldn't be even liked by a person, because it looks like the purpose of a human being to consume material things. But as we are talking right now, based on the books by Anastasia Novych, based on the programs with the participation of Mikhailovich Danilov, and based on the personal experience of many participants from our movement, we do understand who is the real true consumer. It's the animal mind system in this global meaning. But if we take fragmentary, it's the consciousness of every person, and the consciousness of every person exactly strives to consume our major resource, major human resource, which is time and attention. In our society, such consumer-based format is promoted by the conductors of the animal mind wheel. They create and support such traps for people's attention. And one of such powerful traps is what we've been discussing today, is this loan interest. Also, I'd like to add that in the consumer society, even the upbringing system is built in such a way that since childhood, we are not taught to develop ourselves independently and to think independently, to create, but we are taught to consume finished goods. And such finished products are not just goods and services, but efficiently. This is any information, any knowledge, ideology, and even simple, banal, commonplace terms of thinking and behavior. And as a result of such an approach, we have consumer attitude to everything. We have consumer attitude to nature, to the society, to management of the society, to the government, to religion, and to life itself. So as a result of development of such a society, we see substitution of the very meaning of human life. And also, from my personal observations, I have my son is a school student, and in our agreement between school and parents, there is a supplier of educational services and a consumer of educational services. Not even the teacher and the student, but a consumer and a supplier. So such basic concepts are even introduced. And if we ask ourselves, who makes it possible that such a consumer system exists? And to be honest, the answer is the one. We, ordinary people, do this. We ourselves make it possible for this system to exist. We feed it, and for many years I've been thinking about this, and I wondered why this is happening. Now I have such understanding. This is because in society the primordial knowledge was lost, and we forgot what is our real meaning and what is our real purpose. Now we know that a human being is dual. He consists of the animal and the material natures. But first of all, a human being is a spiritual being. And the human need as of a spiritual being is beyond this material world, and it cannot be satisfied with anything material. So we can boldly say that the currently existing material paradigm of consumption is specifically created substitution. And it's necessary for us to talk about this openly and honestly. We have to change the informational space environment. In mass media, we have to create positive, creative, constructive images, and we have to promote true spiritual needs of a human being. What can we do ourselves? We can take responsibility on ourselves. We can develop the creative, constructive nature and character within ourselves. We should limit these traits of consumers and create such a format of society to limit this consumerism in general. This way we will create conditions under which the creative spiritual nature in people will be freer. And it's excellent that now we are just discussing these measures which can promote this. I think this is also a limitation of capitals per family. It's abolition of personal taxes. This is also annulling of loan debts. And what we are discussing today is the abolition of loan interest. At the beginning of the program, it was mentioned that we use the medical term. It's like a surgery on the live organism. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir. We have questions from Czech Republic about the Islamic banks. Please turn on Czech Republic for us. We have a question from Czech Republic about Islamic bank system. Czech Republic has some issues, some troubles with microphone. If it is true that in Islamic bank system, like there is a restriction for lending rate. Yes, there is a ban, and it's very strict ban. And it's really a real positive example. It is a real example, like people in our modern society, very strictly bordered financial system. They just could do this healthy society, healthy financial society, healthy financial relationships. And there are 4 rules in Islamic systems. The first one, the seller can only sell the goods that he owns, like is the owner, and which is physically available to him. And then it's a ban of high-risk operations when it's like futures, when a seller sells
goods that he doesn't owe. And fourth is that the profit can be only the result of commercial, not of, sold in the air, only of commercial. And what is the fundamental reason of these four bases? Islam has still the grains of knowledge, and these four rules restrict the and these help to Islam people just to rule and understand that all conflicts can be that everything can be ruled and driven by good, and they like Muslims understand that this is only way we can build the healthy society. And also, Muslim is forbidden to invest in activities and trade like alcohol, tobacco products, and establishments selling these products, weapons, ammunition, and their components. Of course, the Islamic Bank is bordered by and now it exists only in some areas, but it's an example of healthy bank system. Thank you, Eldar. I would like to comment about Islamic bank system. I would like to look at the principle of collective risk based on partnership. What we see nowadays in usual bank, in our reality, when entrepreneur comes to bank and takes a loan on some annual, and he leaves his own property to like a base for this loan. And if his business doesn't take a development and he can't repay the loan, he gives his business to the bank. And if the business develops and he takes profit, he has to give away a part of these profits to repay the percentage about this loan. And only then the entrepreneur can repay his rates to people who who take part in his business. And in Islamic system, investors take the risks together with businessmen. Unfortunately, today, Islamic bank system only exists in Islamic countries, and they show themselves as healthy financial structures. For example, crisis of 2003, Islamic banking system didn't have this, didn't feel this crisis, didn't have this any damage on them. And it's a really good example that there can be strong and stable financial system. And now we have, and they also have so many tools as crowdfunding and different like crowdfunding platforms. I think that many of us can know about it, that they help to in research like new model of some clothes or some stuff.
For example, from Baikonur, the satellite was there was a satellite came into the space by program like this. And if we are talking about everyday relationships, we don't even need such a complicated system. For example, many people are crowded to do something very simple, to build a house for their friend, or etc. etc. For example, etc. By like really ruled by this program, in Tajikistan, people can do kindergartens or schools. When, for example, if one person will build his house, he will build it only after a year. But if everyone will do this, like crowded in a group, they can do this really quickly. And by these examples, we can see that people really
we don't start that history which was still the so-called civilized countries.
Но это все возможно, и я надеюсь, я ответил на этот вопрос.
If it's just interesting for you, you might just, of course, view or voice your opinion, and in the chat you could ask a question. Of course, we have such examples of such entrepreneurs who spend just their income on the society's needs. Of course, there are just few of such people, but those who get involved in such a process, just they feel satisfied with this process, because you cannot just compare even this satisfaction of helping people with the illusion of buying a yacht or whatever, and the so-called just substitution of happiness. It's just uncomparable things, I would also like to ask for the questions from YouTube. So the question number one, people ask if we discuss just the loan interest or in interest in general, and another question is the loan interest connected with just preserving in the bank, so the deposits is the capital that is in the hands of the bank, and so these are all just interconnected things. These are the elements of the same system. So let's come back. Maybe the viewers didn't understand us. We said that the capital limitation would be able to stop the inflation. If we stop the inflation, then a loaf of bread or a car, whatever. So like a loaf of bread costs 100 hryvnias, and in 10 years' time it would cost the same 100 hryvnias, and so on. And it would be really very important. So if people know that if people knew that they shouldn't just spare that money, should multiply it, then they would be kind of relaxed that they will have free time. They wouldn't be stressed and wouldn't be worrying that they should save that money. If the inflation stops, if we stop the inflation, of course, in order to stop the inflation, we need not just the abolition of the loan interest and capital limitation, but we would also need to create a so-called planned economy, and we would need developed technologies. And even today, people can assess this or can make these assessments how it's possible to do. So if we stop the inflation, then we wouldn't just have to return money on deposits. Yeah, we wouldn't have to to spend lots of resources. We wouldn't just produce what our society doesn't need. We would just produce what is needed by people. What's a request? Unfortunately, guys, so we are closing up already, and we kind of winding up. I would also like to ask, okay, each of you who wants just to voice your opinion or who has an unanswered question, please write your questions, maybe on ALLATRA TV, and please join our Games of Professionals, and maybe we'll just think of about the platform where we would just gather these questions and answers, and we will be studying these issues, and just it will be really a lively discussion if you want.
Okay, Stanislav wants to say something. Let's summarize in brief From program to program, we are talking about the fact that changes are urgent in all fields of society and all over the world. And today we have touched upon the fact that we should unite and resolve issues precisely throughout the world community. And for this, we propose all people to gather together on the 9th of May 2020 to the global all-world referendum to discuss the issues which concern every reasonable person on the planet Earth, including the issues of the unified, creative and constructive economy, including the limitation of capitals, not more than 10 million per family, abolition of taxes, abolition of personal taxes, abolition of loan interest, creation of unified planned economy. If you are interested in these ideas, just remember that in this field, just as any other field, there are many competent people who can join, who can get inspired with this idea, can join efforts together with their like-minded people, and we can think of the details all together. And if every one of us starts changing something in the field where he or she works, then sooner or later we will succeed. And today, thanks to the fact that we have a larger knowledge, we have such mass communication platform as internet, we have an opportunity to unite together on the basis of our common values, of the fact that we all want to live happily, we all want to live in a society of goodness, mutual assistance, mutual support, where everyone is dear and near to everyone else. And if we start putting efforts to that, if we don't keep silent, if we share with our friends and acquaintances the information about the initiatives which are promoted through our movement on the establishment of such a constructive and creative society, then sooner or later we will succeed. Please join us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our friends. And finally, in our program, we'd like to give the floor to Slovakia, where they will host the next game of professionals on social loans. This discussion will take place on the 26th of October at 3 p.m. Central European time, or on 1 p.m. Greenwich time. Thank you very much to everyone. Love and happiness to you all. Thank you.
Друзья, спасибо. Есть еще